We serve just over 200,000 small businesses in South Africa.
That's nuts. Getting people a cash-based economy to transfer over to digital payments, right? What were some of the barriers that you had to overcome? What were the lessons that you learned?
Where things often go wrong is you apply a very late stage, structured, quite process-oriented mindset to an early stage reality.
Only when you're getting bored of the message are other people starting to hear it.
It's been interesting coming together with some of my direct competitors on the topic of regulation for the greater good. I think that's been very positive.
How would you describe the nature of the business at that point and the challenges where it's like, I actually think really sitting down, formalizing our strategy is the right thing to do now?
I don't think we're having the right conversations. As I say, we spend a lot of time on the governance stuff because it's obvious and that's what's in the news, but we're not getting into the structural reform and advocating for that. And yeah, I just think we've reached crunch time on the topic.
What are some of these other structural challenges that are really getting in our way? Hello and welcome back to the Founder Files. Today, I've got a business and co-founder on the podcast that I've been looking to get on here pretty much since I started the podcast. So it is my privilege to welcome Katlego Maphai, the co-founder and CEO of Yoco. In this episode, we obviously kick off, like all of them, around understanding the business of what Yoco is and really how they started as a company and their movement towards product market fit. But then we quite quickly go into what didn't surprise me, but I did really enjoy, was getting to quite a macro level of conversation around the industry of fintech and where Yoco is participating in, more importantly, society and South Africa and entrepreneurship and these barriers towards growing businesses. That's obviously applicable to the markets that Yoco plays in, but it's also applicable to us as entrepreneurs and how we grow. So Katlego shares all of his insights and his opinions around what are the structural issues and systemic issues preventing entrepreneurship from succeeding in this country, but also what he's optimistic about. We then transition into him just being this inspirational visionary, how it is that he guides the purpose, the sense of meaning and contribution, the values and culture of the company through weekly rituals and the practical ways that he is getting the employee base of the company to really buy into the direction the company's headed in. We then transition from culture to strategy, and we talk about when it is in their journey where they really started formalizing their approach to strategy and how this has changed as they are becoming a multi-product business now. And speaking of change, we talk about how not only the organization, but also Katlego's role and how he as a person has changed in this journey. So this is a fundamental example for me around how entrepreneurs evolve as their businesses evolve. And as the scale increases, our perspective and our vision changes as well. And I think Katlego is an amazing example and role model for what it means to be a leader and CEO of an entrepreneurial business in South Africa. So if you're enjoying this and if you're excited to listen to this episode and you're not already following the Founder Files, you're going to miss out on many other episodes like Yoco, like Katlego, where you hear from founders like him around what it takes to scale their business, how they think, what they're doing about solving some of the problems in society in South Africa, and learning from these stories and insights of how it is that they have built these businesses. So if that's the kind of content that you enjoy and want to hear more of, make sure to follow, like, subscribe now to make sure you don't miss any other further episodes. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Katlego Maphai. Welcome to the Founder Files, the podcast that's like eavesdropping on a conversation with a successful entrepreneur over a fireside chat. Join me, Cameron Coots, through this unique experience of unfiltered stories and insights from scaling founders around the globe as they share their ups, downs, and everything in between. Katlego, welcome to the Founder Files. I'd be really lying to you, myself, and the audience if I said that I haven't been looking to this podcast episode for a very long time. So I think now that we've done over 100, it's amazing to welcome you to the Founder Files. Thank you for being here. I can't wait to get into Yoco's story.
Hey, Cameron, very happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation and spending a bit of time together.
So Yoco's obviously evolved so much as a company over the years compared to when it originally started in 2013. I don't think there's many people that listen to this that haven't heard of Yoco or doesn't know what Yoco is and hasn't been at least a stakeholder of Yoco's in some way or another, either as a customer or as a business owner. But I think just help us understand what the business and business model is. Maybe a bit of a complicated question because there's multiple business models, but yeah, just help us understand Yoco as a business.
Sure, Cameron. Always good to go back to the beginning, why we did this in the first place. So The majority of businesses in Africa, the Middle East, and even the world are small businesses, right? In our region, they make up 90% of businesses. They, on average, collectively contribute about 50% to GDP, and they drive the majority of employment. So it's such a critical segment, both in terms of employment and also just keeping money within a community and not centralizing it into, a large kind of incumbent-driven city, right? Where money is concentrated. So it's a really important segment, and obviously within this segment, it's all about trade and the exchange of value, and that's what a payment represents, right? So irrespective of what's actually being used as a mechanism to pay, a payment is happening, which represents some sort of transaction in the economy, and you add that all up, and you have GDP. So when we came into the space, and we started taking a look at it, back in 2013, we found that getting a card machine was incredibly difficult. You had to call your bank. You had to be in a central area where a salesperson could come see you. Fees were opaque, so it was a negotiation. And if there was information asymmetry, merchants were being charged, especially small businesses were being charged up to 5% back then. You had to rent a card machine. You had to commit to minimum volumes. You had to take out a contract. It was just completely nuts. And at the time, only 250,000 businesses out of 5 million plus in South Africa could take a card payment, despite there being, 7 out of 10 consumers with a card in their pocket, right? We were quite a well-banked society, which is something we should be proud of. So we saw this problem. We wanted to do something about it. And our key insight was the mobile phone business model and the card acceptance business model were completely identical. So you have a piece of hardware that's communicating with some sort of a network to, do something, right? So whether it's to make phone calls or to make a payment, it's essentially the same thing. But in the one model, you could walk to your mobile phone shop, photocard, MTN, whatever, buy your phone, buy your SIM card, recharge, and within an hour you're making phone calls. And in the other model, you had to jump through all these hoops, even though the models were identical. So our thesis was, if we could make getting a card machine as simple as getting a cell phone, and that user experience, which everyone's so accustomed to, right? You just pick up your phone and you make a call. If we could make taking a payment as simple as that, then we could really unlock the market. And that was really the genesis of Yoco. The vision, it's very simple. It's something we call open commerce. We want to open up commerce to all those who want to participate and give them the tools to become active members of society, which small businesses are. They were just unseen because they were dealing in cash and running everything on pen and paper. So people knew they were there, but how could you account for them? And all of a sudden, having a digital payment, a piece of software meant that you evolved out of this kind of rudimentary space. You started to exist because now you started having records. And through that, you could now start going on a formalization journey as a business while increasing your revenues, because now, the 7 out of 10 consumers could start spending their cards with higher basket sizes at your location. So that was very much the genesis of the company, what we wanted to do. And we've been very proud of the progress over the last decade.
So in that decade, what's this level of scale that you're at now?
Yeah, so we just over 200,000 small businesses in South Africa.
That's nuts.
Really countrywide, in all corners of the country. And the reason we were able to reach all corners of the country was we used e-commerce as a distribution channel. And that was ultimately enabled by the fact that you didn't need somebody to come see you to set you up and configure the thing in your environment. We just You went online, sign up in 5 minutes. We shipped it to you, within 48 hours across the country, and you could just turn it on and take a payment. So that's really what created the unlock.
So what I'm super curious around with the first part, because obviously I had Matt Putman from Yoco on here as well, and they try to start off with hardware and realized kind of how complicated it was to get started. An assumption that I had when obviously looking at Yoco is that, and again, I've got no idea. I'm a psychologist, right? So I'm going to be really making assumptions how the tech works here. But the difference between the hardware that you have, that's actually where you'll put the card into or tap the card. Obviously, that needs to attach to a mobile device. Most other card machines, the transmission and communication technology is built into the device as well. You've separated that. And my assumption is that it allows you to, anyone who has the device that takes the card payment originally, that can stay for as long as possible, whilst what happens with the software that you have on the mobile device can change depending on regulatory frameworks or compliance or whatever it needs to happen, which means that you don't need to now go really update all of these devices with either software updates or actually changing the hardware. You can keep the hardware and then you just run the software so that people have one device that they can utilize all the time. Is that true?
Yes, partially. So let me break it down a little bit. When Square pioneered this business model in the United States, they used this magnetic stripe reader, which cost less than $30, that plugged into the radio jack on your phone. The US was a bit slow to get into chip and pin, so they were still swiping. And what happened was Square then came up with a really low cost way to deliver a card machine to merchants, to the point where they were literally giving away that little dongle away for free. And I guess in the process, they had pioneered the use of smart technology, Android, iOS, in line with the reader, which actually created a smart device, which was not the case before. Most card machines were Linux, very basic based solutions. So we did something similar. We had a plug-in device, didn't last for too long, our first device, and then we moved to Bluetooth, and that's really when we started to see the growth. And you are correct that you had this piece of hardware that somebody would tap and type in the PIN, and then you had the merchant that was using a piece of software on a smart device, which just created an enriched experience. So that's how we started off, and we really got to the innovators and the early adopters using that mechanism. But then we found to truly cross the chasm and to get into scalability, we needed to bring the smart device and the machine together again. And that's when we launched the Android card machines, which is really fascinating, right? If you go back to our original thesis about the company, that we need to make this as simple as getting a mobile phone, you now have a situation where card machines are almost mobile phones when you look at them, right? It's Android software, there's a SIM card inside, and you can take a payment. So it's amazing just seeing how the technology caught up with this thesis.
I think I've even seen videos of people playing Doom on a card machine.
Exactly.
The original Doom game.
Exactly. But yes, I guess Cameron is, having these two pieces was fine at the beginning, but to get to scalability, we needed to bring it all together to make it as simple as possible. And that's been fantastic.
Okay. The reason why I love doing this is because I get to go on tangents wherever I have a curious question. Obviously, this is going to come with other challenges around connectivity and how the payment gets transmitted, right? So I think with actual card machines, again, I think the technology's evolved, but what I remember when I used to work in hospitality, there was a SIM card in it, or which maybe connect to Wi-Fi. Now it's this kind of Bluetooth connection to a mobile device that connects to the internet. There's obviously these challenges of you wanting to make it as easy as, being able to pick up your phone and make a phone call. Right? I think there's still these challenges around connectivity and these barriers there. What were these ones around so the product was there. And again, I want to go full circle kind of back to the value, but that kind of customer experience and the efficiency of making this easy to do, what were the kind of challenges that you faced there, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, our first device plugged into the headphone jack, but then the merchant had to give, their phone away to the customer, and the customer had to type in the PIN on the devices. We made it work, but it was quite clunky. We then moved to, smart phone, smart device, and the Bluetooth reader. And as I mentioned before, that really was quite transformative for us, but it was very much for this kind of a particular segment of the market that like to try new things. And then when we made the move into a standalone device with the SIM card, with Android and the like, that also just allowed us to take on another arc. I guess, interestingly enough, when we moved on to the standalone devices, we created a new problem because they were now not connected to our software anymore, right? So we had software running on the device, and then, a point of sale software running on a tablet or a phone, and they were now not working together. So we'd solved the problem, but created a new one. And then we did something quite innovative to solve this problem, and it's been really exciting to see us roll this out now. So we've implemented an IoT standard. It's called MQQT, which allows our devices to communicate with our software over the cloud. So there's no direct Bluetooth connection, but they both communicate over the cloud, and they can now engage with each other. So, if you're ever out and you see one of our blue devices, Android, facing a customer, and a piece of or a tablet or a point of sale with the merchant, just know that each of these devices are communicating independently over the cloud. This was really innovative for us to introduce, and it's just made that connection process slick. When a merchant comes on, they literally select the card machine they want to use, the connection gets done, and it's as simple as that. So that took quite a bit of work to get that done, but we have started rolling that out, and we've now been able to fuse kind of the Android devices with the point of sale software, and that's really compelling.
So I always love simplicity explained after complexity. What I'm not fully understanding is what problem that solves. Because as for me, as a non-tech normie, right, I think, okay, well, Bluetooth connection to device to one Wi-Fi connection seems a lot more linear and a lot more straightforward. For two devices to kind of communicate directly into the cloud through an internet connection, that just sounds more complicated, right? What problem did that solve?
Yeah, so the challenge is that Bluetooth can be quite flaky. Kind of goes on and off, it oscillates, and that was creating problems for us at the point of purchase. Also, Bluetooth to Bluetooth, from one smart device to another smart device, and having a constant connection was also proving to be quite a challenge for us to solve technically. So we wanted to tap into the innate ability of these smart devices to communicate with the cloud and to engage at a central point. So that was really what we were trying to solve. And then in the process of doing that, we actually created just a much slicker experience in terms of the devices being able to communicate with each other.
Okay, so basically just the internet connection is a lot more reliable than a Bluetooth connection.
Exactly.
Okay.
And we saw that in the improvement in the transaction approval rate, right? So it just went up significantly just because of the connectivity. In addition to that, we can see in real time if a connection is down between the devices, between us. We can see in real time what's happening with the merchant. And it allows us to be a bit more proactive to see what's going on. So we have a lot more visibility into what's going on, which is much better for the support experience. But I guess maybe not to take for granted the higher order thing here that's of value. Typically in an environment, let's take a restaurant, you have a bill that's generated on the point of sale, and you have a payment that happens on a terminal. and there's a reconciliation process that needs to happen at the end of the day, and some cash up. And this is a whole thing after the restaurant is closed that needs to happen. The moment you have the bill and the payment reconciled in real time because they're integrated, you remove that process, that end of day process, and you bring a lot of integrity with what's going on like in real time inside the business. And that's a massive value add for our customers in terms of control, and also just giving them back time from admin at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, that's my, I have like 7.5 years of experience working in hospitality because my mom had a restaurant when I was growing up, obviously like working in hospitality throughout university. And I just remember it's like, especially when you'd work like late shifts in a bar, for example, the last thing you want to do then is like, and also you're tired, you're cognitively like drained.
Exactly.
So it's like there's a lot of room for error in balancing. As a business owner, it's painful for the employees. It's the case. And I think I want to use this as a segue to go full circle in terms of your journey to product market fit, because for me, what that answers again as a whole is a reason to overcome this resistance to why is it that I should go from cash, which I can control, and I don't trust the government, I don't trust banks, I don't trust I want to be avoiding tax, say in inverted commas. And now to do this means that suddenly I feel like I'm more at risk, actually, right? And I think there's a huge significant mindset shift that was required. And I think this is the importance of well articulated value proposition, because in itself it is educational. And the way that you've explained this now from a why is it that we're doing this is because the fact that it's like, okay, well, the benefit of using our technology means that cash up at the end of the day will only literally have to happen for cash, right? It's like if you're doing all your payments through the software, then it's automatically reconciled. And you can actually spend your time focusing on actually running the business, which is great. And then gets me curious. So I want to go that full circle back to the original point around getting people a cash-based economy to transfer over to digital payments, right? What were some of the barriers that you had to overcome? What were the lessons that you learned that really overcame the inertia of the status quo?
Yeah, so we really believe in the diffusion of innovation process, and the function. We really, really believe in that. And at the beginning, we engaged with the innovators. It was relationships we had, people who like trying new things. We're just enamored by new technology, right? And those are the customers you want to engage with first to go like, are we onto something or are we wasting our time? And then the early adopters who give you, quite intense in feedback, but because they care and they want to see you improve the product and they believe you can improve the product and they like being part of that process. And I remember for us, the coffee shops were such an important early customer, kind of the small businesses, banks treated them as small, especially if they were starting out. But for us, they were the perfect customer in that, they had high frequency transactions. So, having our device facing the customer and them doing the payment and the point of sale facing inwards really, sped up checkout. They gave us a lot of feedback and they really forced us to make our product and our systems as robust as possible because just things needed to work and needed to be quick. And the other thing about coffee shops is that, everyone drinks coffee, right? In inverted commas. So this actually built a lot of, early visibility for us as a company. And I remember when we signed up Truth Coffee, which is, a very world famous coffee shop in Cape Town, in the country, just the validation that gave to us and, also just the rest of the market that like we were a real product and not just something, some gimmick, right? That was non-bank. So that was really the journey to getting to product market fit and to the early growth. And that was very important.
Not to put you on the spot, and I promise this is going somewhere in the relevance. Your
Sure.
purpose, mission, and vision, what are they? Or at least your
Yeah.
philosophy, I guess, at a high level.
So I mentioned our vision earlier. It's open commerce. Just want to open commerce for all. We want to foster participation. We want to bring down the barriers, right? And democratize access. In terms of purpose, it's incredibly simple. We just want to enable people to thrive. So this is quite universal. We just want to leave our environment, our community, our society better than how we found it through what we do. And we really have this privilege to work with small businesses who play a pivotal role within their communities, both in terms of the consumers they serve and also the employment they provide. So that's very much what's centered around there. And I think in terms of mission, it's pretty straightforward, right? We want to enable access as fast as possible, within our region with high quality product, and working very actively towards making this happen.
So, and you mentioned earlier around like the importance of what Yoco is doing is ensuring that just even at a macro level is ensuring that money can basically stay within communities and not go into more city-based incumbents. What my understanding of what you mean by that is that the problem of kind of semigration and people moving from small towns, even like just like suburbs into CBDs, just for more economic activity. Well, less economic activity can happen there.
Exactly.
That was my that's my interpretation of that. The context of why I'm saying all this is because what I find with a lot of entrepreneurs are a special breed of people because we're incredibly ambitious, often visionaries, want to see major significant changes in society. But both are, I'd say, generally our greatest strength is also our greatest weakness. We're very impatient, right? And so it means that we're able to do things very quickly. But the point of where I'm getting to is I see too many people trying to make their mission, their vision, a reality too quickly. And what happens is that this kind of post-product market fit points, they now start employing multiple growth strategies at the same time because it's like we've solved our original survival problem. We tried to do too much. I think we'll get in there, and I would love to unpack that situation for you and your own experience of that. But where I'm going fully back to the beginning is that even though there's this grand vision and there's significant societal level change that you want to make in terms of open commerce, we need to start in terms of who is the easiest customer segment now where we can just start this process with. And it's
Exactly.
and it's versus like the people that you wanted to be impacting versus the first customers that you got are not the same, right? We're going to go coffee shops, right? But then how can we get that to spaza shops, right, in time, right? And
Exactly.
like and I think that's and the point there is that that's also that's amazing patience, discipline, but also good strategy. But just to start with, in terms of how is it that we can ensure that this is a viable company before we go down that route. That's my interpretation of the story. What's your experience of that?
No, spot on, Cameron. The biggest mistake I see founders, even governments to an extent, right, make is what I call the conflation of vision and strategy. So when the vision starts becoming your strategy, that's really right. A dilution of focus starts to kick in, trying to do too much, and forgetting the power of sequencing, right? So the strategy is all about sequencing towards your vision, and making sure that at each step of the way you're aligning your the underlying opportunity with the capability that you have to deliver on it. And also sequencing those steps to show that like every step you move forward is compounding in a strong direction. So yeah, fully subscribe to that. Obviously we also gotten that wrong, right, as a company. So you kind of get from one stage to another, you bite off more than you can chew, and then you kind of have to reset a little bit, get back to basics, and then start ramping up again. It's a constant tension, and often it comes with a success, right? So, you get one thing right, and you're like, okay, let's go do more, and let's do more in parallel, which is actually the opposite, right? The reason you got the thing right was because you focused. And so how do you maintain that focus as you move along? And that's the constant challenge for any company that's moving, that's growing and trying to get to the next level.
And I get so fascinated by the psychology of this is because, like, you'll go through that journey of getting that, without even using just like specific terminology, just like that first ledge of success. And then the moment that you have that success, you suddenly forgot how hard it was to get there in the first place. And so
Exactly.
when we have these new ideas and opportunities that we go after, we're basing it off of, at least emotionally, this feeling of success rather than this memory of how hard it was. And so we realize that we're going to go down new paths where we're actually not noticing that we're starting something from scratch. And it feels like we're just doing the next thing. And then you get smacked in the face with reality, and it was like, oh, wow, okay, cool. There's a whole nother learning curve that I need to go on here.
Yeah, no, spot on, Cameron. Back to the diffusion of innovation curve I was describing, right? It's a bell curve. It's a life cycle. It's accurate. It really, really is. And as you say, like where things often go wrong is you apply a very late stage structured, quite process oriented mindset to an early stage reality, which requires just being very adaptive, scrappy, and learning as you go. And yeah, like as you grow a business, you're now starting to kick off new life cycles. And the last thing you want to do is to apply that late stage thinking or putting the wrong people onto that earlier stage stuff, and vice versa, right? You don't want to have early stage people working on late stage things. It just requires a very different mentality. So the way you organize yourself around these things, it's not straightforward, but it's really the key to the unlock.
So my opinion on this, and obviously I still have a long way to go for this, and it's actually something that in the back of my head, I can see myself doing my PhD on entrepreneurial psychology at some point. But the thought that I have that's just the simplest is us as the founders playing to our strengths. And for many entrepreneurs, specifically ones that are amazing at the 0 to 1 journey, are such good innovators, but they're low on conscientiousness, very high on openness to new experience. And so they're actually, for them, the nature of being an executive of an established company, the job is a very different skill set and motivation and personality profile. And so I go to the point of, why is it that I care so much around building sustainable businesses beyond obviously for the economy? Is also for the entrepreneurs themselves to be like, how do we focus on doing first things first, getting that truly established, getting the right people into the right roles, and then I can go back to where it is that I feel most strong, right? And that's what a strength is. My favorite definition of a strength is not what I'm good at, it's where I feel most strong. Weakness is not what I'm bad at, it's where I feel the weakest.
Yes.
Right. And so the problem is too many entrepreneurs, because we built this amazing skill set of having to do everything in the business, we don't realize that we're operating so much in our weaknesses. But that's not because we're bad at the job, it's just because it's not what drives us. And moving over to strength is, how do you get the sense of freedom? And you can now focus on the innovation whilst you have a management structure and management team to do so. Or in your case, you can continue evolving as a leader to go from business unit level to multi-business unit to kind of group-wide industry level visionary in that journey. So yeah, just play to your strengths. It's simplicity.
No, 100%. I think, yeah, when I look at South Africa, for an economy as developed as ours, I would have expected to see more new ventures, more scale ups, just more, right? Like all the ingredients are there. But the economy is still quite concentrated capital still quite concentrated. There is a concentration of skills. Like, it's a little bit inward looking, if I were to be honest. And I think the one thing we're missing out on as an economy is, once you have lots of new businesses and scale up and all that dynamism like beginning to kick in, that also has such a significant impact on the talent equation, right? Because you're just getting lots of people getting to move across these organizations, taking skills, like right aligning themselves to the right stage. And quite frankly, like that's the secret to the Silicon Valley, right? Is you have late stage, early stage companies all within a small area geographically. It really, really is. But this talent is just moving around and giving each of these businesses what they need. And it's also market determined, right? So people are just kind of attracted to ideas that appeal to themselves. So yeah, I think we would just love to see more of that in South Africa. I think there's quite a bit that needs to happen in terms of truly opening up the economy. We're still very much in a closed economy orientation. It's not always obvious, but it's there when you look a little bit closer. And we just love to see a bit more of a dynamic economy. I think that would have a tremendous impact on just skills and the movement of skills and the like.
I definitely want to go deeper on this topic because for me, my experience of this, and just you look at the capability of South Africans, look at the resourcefulness of South Africans, right? You just look at like culturally how we're set up and our ability to solve problems. There's so much potential that just like, I don't understand, like the fundamental point that I'm making is I feel like entrepreneurship in this country should be easier. Why is it so hard?
Yeah, I've got my own theories. So
I asked the question.
Yeah, so South Africa, people forget that we were a closed economy for a long time, during the days of sanctions. That only really came to an end in kind of the mid-90s when there was a transition. But the business culture that emerges when you're a closed economy is very different, right? So kind of all industry players now need to sit around the table. They need to organize themselves. The role of regulation is to protect an industry and the players in it versus fostering competition, or even just protecting consumers. So just the leanings are on protecting business. And if you're all sitting around the table and that just becomes how things are done, who's to say that just stops because, I don't know, we have an election, right? There is an orientation in South Africa towards incumbency, towards keeping things the same. People almost revere in it. And in that context, there's you have an ecosystem around that, right? Even down to like who's employing you and where you earn and the like. And that also means that you kind of don't have an incentive around these skills going out and starting something. And then also part of that concentration is just capital, right? So we have these exchange controls also from the days of sanctions. So, you kind of need permission to send or receive $100 out of the country, which is not normal. And then you layer in some of the immigration policy where we don't have incentives to attract highly skilled people to the country, even though they want to move here. So if you look at all these dimensions, so the nature of competition and the structure of industries and incumbency and oligopoly, the exchange controls and concentration of capital, and is money allowed to flow freely to good ideas, and then the skills piece related both to immigration and the incentives for people to leave these large companies and go do things, this all just keeps everything very static. And you're seeing that in our growth numbers, right? We've barely been growing for the last decade. And there's been a predominant view that it's primarily a governance issue. And of course it is. We do have governance issues. But in my opinion, I think it's more structural than that in terms of the way the economy operates. And I just don't believe we're operating in a fully market-driven system. It's partially market-driven and very organized. And this kind of starves entrepreneurship and, the flowing of skills and capital to new ideas. It's all very circular, and this needs to be broken.
So I've got a sociological opinion on this that I got from Tracy Chambers, which is interesting enough. That's why, again, love doing this podcast. But you mentioned it's very much a structural problem. We're not as market driven as you should be. Explain what you mean, right? Because obviously, I think the more clear that we can be on explaining or describing something, the more likely we are to change it.
So what I basically mean is there isn't an active policy framework that's looking to foster competition and new entrants and the flow of capital and skills towards great ideas. The system is geared around incumbency and also compliance. So we love compliance here.
So basically, just the system is orientated around keeping these oligopolies. It's not really the ability to be able to disrupt established industries is so difficult.
Exactly.
Practically, what does that look like? I can look at this from macro level. It's like that's just the way it is. But what are the things that are in place that are preventing that from changing?
So it's gatekeeping, right? And on the one hand, it's what are the incentives to change things? Incumbents obviously have large balance sheets, so they can also have quite an outsized influence, even just at a lobbying level, as to how things work. So kind of when you zoom out from a policy framework, you're like, well, what's really changed, right? The only thing you've seen from a policy perspective is just more compliance, right? How do you divide things up? Who should get what? And incumbents can afford this. They just throw money at it. Smaller businesses can't. It just becomes a burden. So then they almost restrict themselves. I was speaking to an entrepreneur the other day who was like saying, I don't want to have more than 50 people because that's now going to put us in a new compliance bracket that I just don't want to deal with. So imagine that, right? Like that's how people are thinking about things, not how they're going to grow or innovate or solve new problems, but how can I not have to get to this threshold so that I don't have to deal with compliance? So this is very systemic across the economy, and it's nice for lawyers and accountants, but it's not useful for growth. And I really think we're struggling with that as a country. And I don't think we're having the right conversations. As I say, we spend a lot of time on the governance stuff because it's obvious and that's what's in the news. But we're not getting into the structural reform and advocating for that. And I just think we've reached crunch time on the topic.
Yeah, I really want to get more practical and tangible this, because like the example that you gave there is very true. It's like you start getting to certain tiers where there's people avoiding trying to be a $1 million business in terms of records, because now they'll have to be registered for that, right? And that's just on like a micro business level. That's such a significant challenge towards the economy, but it's also just these barriers towards like literally barriers to growth. Like I'm choosing not to grow my business because even though there's always this penalty of getting to a certain size that I need to then outgrow that penalty in order to keep going, right? And that's the simplest one, just at the 1 million rand mark. But now you talk about the 50 person mark. What are some of these other like structural challenges that are really getting in our way?
Yeah, I mean, just even some of our labor law, reporting on employment equity, once again, if you're a large business, you can pay people to do this, you can outsource it, etc., etc. If you're a very small business, you're a little bit like, you don't have to deal with these things. If you're in the middle, you've got this massive compliance burden. And these things are just very pervasive. And it's just this kind of underlying cultural belief that like we will solve problems through compliance. And that's just simply not true. We solve problems through innovation and unlock, and allowing the market system to do its thing. And a classic example, a really good example, was kind of on the power issue, where independent power production, heavily regulated, restricted, etc., etc. And we've been having all these things, and just a little bit of deregulation happened, and the market system kicked in, and people who could put solar panels on their roofs, put on their batteries. Independent power producers began to like really flourish, and all of a sudden, the market system solved a problem in record time just because it was allowed to do it. So that's kind of a really good frame of reference of what I believe is occurring in other parts of the economy, where there's just these rules and these regulations and these restrictions that are very protectionist for the industry, but are not allowing like a true market system to play out. And it's net the economy and the consumer and the everyday South African that loses out.
Okay, you gave a great point of reference there, and I can just explain this again. I always like to think down to what's the psychology and the motion of this, is because why is it that what I would want to put in regulations to protect the status quo? Predominantly fear, right? And so let's look at state-owned enterprise like Eskom, and it's like we need to overcome this fear of change, because it's the point of like, yes, there's the cynical but real attitude around the fact that it's like there is corruption behind this. There are people to stands to benefit by maintaining the status quo. That's just also, again, just the nature of reality and society. But I think there's also the other point to it. It's like if we're removing the cynicism, it's kind of just this fear of, well, what if it doesn't work? We're we're already in a sensitive situation. What if it actually backfires, and what if it gets worse? And part of our historical framework are very few examples of deregulation and then positive innovation and change. So we don't have a memory to work off of, is the fact that this can benefit us. And so the problem is the way that the natural approach towards handling fear is control, right? And certainty. And how it is that I get control and certainty is increasing compliance. So I think what we need is actually courage. To be like, we need to trust in our own capability, trust that we're going to be able to solve things, and trust that we can respond to that. And I think that's also not a hard thing to be courageous about, because that also is part of like South African nature.
Exactly.
And when you spoke about like the like medium-sized businesses as well, it makes so much sense around what I find is that there's so many entrepreneurs and so many entrepreneurial stories I get to speak about within the Founder Files. But this journey of like really true success stories is you either have like Adrian Gore, right, of like discovery, like of building all the way up to an oligopoly tier, or like you kind of lose it in the noise of medium-sized businesses. And there's even a media issue here of just like vocalizing entrepreneurship that's a problem. But yeah, that's a whole spider web of other tangents to go down. But the point that I'm raising that you clarified is that at a medium-sized business is naturally, what is it that helps entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial businesses succeed is speed and agility, right? And also profitability, right? Is the fact that it's like, I need profitability to reinvest into certain points. When you enter new life cycle stages, naturally, net profitability goes down as you invest into new structures, new systems, new investments, but then that comes back over time. But now what we're penalized with is you get to certain, not even life cycle stages, you just get to certain metrics and certain points, right? And you might not even be ready for it, but suddenly you need to spend all this money just on compliance administration. that slows you down.
Exactly.
It not only slows you down internally because of all the governance that you have to do there, but you have to spend so much money on this stuff, either for external consultants building these capabilities internally, that just hinders our ability to grow and means that we just need to work so much harder to get through this. And it also explains why a lot of people exit at certain tiers, because like, I just don't want to deal with the compliance issue.
Exactly. And that's the thing. It's non-value adding work that takes up a lot of time and costs a lot of money. And there's just too much of that. It's so pervasive. And yeah, we've just accepted it as okay, and it's not okay. I'll give another example on this topic just to help land it. There was a time when our internet was really bad in the country. We barely had our undersea. We didn't have enough undersea cables landing for access to the global internet. That event, so that was one problem. And then we had this telecom monopoly. And yeah, it was just really rough. Even when we started a company and moved into our first office, it was this special thing that we could get a fiber line, right? But none of us had ever used one at home. But then some deregulation happened, and Vumatel ran a pilot in Parktown North to deliver fiber to the home. They proved the pilot, and boom, we have now some of the best connectivity in the world. We have a bunch of undersea cables that have landed, and the loop has been unbundled, and now there's even fiber now starting to get into more rural areas and also into the township. It's like whole models starting to be developed in and around just this basic step of deregulating and allowing the market system to solve, and not believing that the incumbents should be given undue advantage to not solve a problem. So that's just another example I wanted to share. And as a company, it's not just about blue card machines. The way we see it is we need to break this wall that's kind of protecting incumbents from new entrants, because it's there. We need to break that wall, and our view is once we break that wall down, everyone can run in behind us, right? And then you have a dynamic, economy that's vibrant, and skills are being developed. People are, moving across opportunities and new ideas and new companies. That's really what you want to be seeing. And South Africa has all the ingredients. There just needs to be a culture of getting out the way and allowing the market system with the right guardrails to do its thing versus trying to control it.
Yeah, that's again my favorite phrase is freedom within a framework, and moving in that direction. Also, everything that you echoed there shows the vision that you have also around the purpose statement and the word thrive, because what you just explained highlights that. And we also have the word thrive in our purpose statement, because it's what we really want to care about. And I think it's very difficult for entrepreneurs to thrive in this country. So what you wanted to, as you said, you want to create this path. You want to break down these barriers and make it easier for other people to follow. What are you currently doing about that?
Yeah, so we are just using the market system with incentives, which in our case is just access, great product, good experience, a brand you can connect to bring small business into the formal economy. In terms of higher order, we have to engage with regulation. So we are a regulated entity. There's an evolution that's happening with regulation in South Africa. It's taking a bit of time, and the urgency is very important. There's just so many more third parties now in the system that are solving problems that incumbents couldn't have and are doing it in an economically viable way, right? Which is amazing. but regulation needs to catch up to fully support these models, which net benefits everyone, right? Digitization benefits everyone, including incumbents. We're decashing the system, which is good for all. But yeah, we've just formed a non-bank payment association called ASAP, which is really centered around this. So, how do we move things forward with urgency in a smart and safe way to foster a financial inclusion in a economically sustainable way, right? And the economic sustainability is directly linked to having a level playing field for all players within the system. This is very, very important. You can't have a situation where kind of some of us are competing with one hand behind our back. Just who does that benefit except incumbents, right? And if that's the case, then once again, one way or the other, it's the end consumer that's going to lose through what I would describe as the destruction of value, and then you'll just see the degradation of quality of experience as a result of that. So yeah, that's what we're working on, some higher order things. It's been interesting coming together with some of my direct competitors on sort of the topic of regulation for the greater good. I think that's been very positive. And yeah, looking forward to advancing things in the market.
Yeah, you don't need to convince me to talk higher order and macro. It's I get a big kick out of it, especially because I don't get to do it enough, to be honest. On that last point, I think there's a last question I want to get to before actually getting back to Yoco's story. And I think this has been some really insightful conversation, a lot of wisdom to what you've shared. But I also want to get some practical nuggets and takeaways for some part. So one last question that I want to have here. Real talk for a moment. Based on everything that we've spoken about, what are you pessimistic about and optimistic about?
Right. So I am pessimistic about incumbents, both at a business level, so I start there, and at a political level, really anchoring themselves to the bigger picture and the greater good, right? They're still very inward-looking, very scarcity mindset, and just operate compliance and operate from that base, right? And as such, very closed off. And it's so important that a company or any institution really sees itself as a fundamental part of the society, and that they have a vested interest towards the greater good, which actually may mean giving up on something for that to happen, but then we all benefit. So I like telling the story of, when you're walking down the street and it's a hot day and all these trees covering you to give you shade. And I always try and take a moment to remember that, many, many years ago, somebody decided to plant those trees, and they may not even be alive to enjoy them, but I get to enjoy them and appreciate them and benefit from them. And we need more of that mentality, right? So that's where my pessimism sits. Like, I'm observing, I'm looking, and I'm still, it struck me that we've done this whole GNU thing, we've got coalition, but there hasn't been some sort of a conference to bring together the best economic minds and business leaders to come up with a growth strategy for South Africa. Like, this should have been priority number one. And the fact that it hasn't happened, and like all the nonsense that's going on now, that's like so far away from our underlying reality and what we need to solve. We're kind of debating Elon Musk and Donald Trump on the news. Like, can we debate our economy, please? Can we do the things? So that's what's creating pessimism for me, to be honest. But the optimism also linked to this is, I do think we're sitting on a burning platform. I think we have a really interesting generation in the country of people who want to solve things, who want to tackle problems, who care about the greater good. And my optimism is, how does this voice become louder, more prominent, and more relevant? Because that's what's going to take South Africa forward. And there's a generational dimension to this too, for sure. And yeah, I just want kind of the abundance generation to start taking on more leadership, and just kind of the scarcity generation to just start taking more of a backseat and realizing that their mentality is from a different time and it's no longer relevant going forward.
Katlego, if you get into politics, you've got my vote. No, because I fundamentally agree with you, man. Like, if we're focused on the wrong problems, like it's just so impractical, and getting into this temptation of offense, if I can just put it that way, is like, who's getting offended by who, and then respond there. And it's just these ego battles, right? And it's just the point of, it's like, you're missing the point of your job at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Right. And I find that also very deeply frustrating. I love the fact that you also use terminology like scarcity mindset and abundance mentality. Are you familiar with the spiral dynamics model of like human consciousness?
I do not know.
You're going to love this. I'm not going to do it now, because it's basically, I'm going to go into like a 5-minute lecture mode. Maybe we can do this offline, but it's something that I've, just to give you the basis of it, is something called value orientations. And the spiral dynamics is the fact that it goes on an upward spiral of increasing level of consciousness and awareness. On the one side, you have individualistic. On the other side, you have collectivistic. So these are also representations at a micro level in terms of the awareness that and consciousness that individuals have, but they're also good frameworks and representations for societies at large, right? And so from there, because they go on increasing spirals, you also see these different value orientations around what we believe to be true and right in the world. And it's this organizing framework with which that dictates decision-making behavior and relatability to one another. The fact that you already see that, and based on the previous conversation, I know where you sit. Or I have a hypothesis to where you sit. Let me put it that way. But I think it would be useful, because it's naturally you see this. I think that the framework would be helpful. So maybe when we finish the podcast, I'll just share that with you.
Cameron, I'd love to take a look at that. Yeah, look, I do think about these things, and in all honesty, comes from a position of privilege, right? So I was lucky how I grew up, within the context that I grew up, and all the exposure I got, both in our home, to my parents, who are just very broad people, countries I've gotten to stay in, all the different cultures I've gotten to engage with, and the environments I've had a chance to work in. Kind of these all just open up perspective, and in the end, like, our ability to come together around something common is fundamental. I really believe it's such the big part of this collective journey. And yeah, it's a bit sad for me when leaders or institutions they forget this, and it's just all extraction and getting mine. You just don't realize you're harming yourself in the process, whether you realize it or not.
And on this, I think it's the same problem that we face for organizations, right? Society is an organization. It's just an extremely complex level of one. Simplicity, like, most people don't know the strategy of the organization they're in. They don't know the goal that they're headed towards. They don't know how to contribute towards it. And so with that means, I don't know what I'm working towards. I don't know what I'm problem solving towards. And you're not creating an opportunity for healthy conflict. So it's my point. At a governmental level in South Africa, we don't have a simple goal or set of goals in terms of where we're trying to head to, right? And without that, what ends up happening is it ends up becoming agenda versus agenda.
Exactly.
Philosophy versus philosophy, instead of just what's the goal and how we're going to get there. And like, that's just the fundamental basis of what I find so obvious is where to start with is obviously like, I can't believe I'm about to say gap analysis, but like gap analysis, where are we now? But also the point of like, but genuinely, what's the goal and where do we want to get to and how we're going to get there? Without that, you can't have progress. Like that's the famous quote. I was actually just some researchers from because I quote it all the time. But a man that knows not to which port he sails, no wind is favorable. And
Exactly.
especially in a time of geopolitical uncertainty and volatility, we're getting swayed way more than we should be if we just simply had a clear direction to where we wanted to go.
Spot on. Spot on. Yeah, no, it is unfortunate. And look, but there's just so many great examples of within our society, right, where you see glimpses of this. I speak about the Springboks a lot, not just as a rugby team, but just as an institution, and seeing its evolution and a symbol, yeah, and also just that first World Cup, with Pina and Mandela and what that meant at that point in time. The Jake White team, where you started sort of seeing this emergence of a new class of player, and the diversity that came in that. I remember Nick Mallett forcing the players to learn the anthem, the full anthem, and to model that, and how that changed how people singing the anthem in the stadium. And you had that weird thing where certain parts were loud and others not so much. And then this current team, which is, in my opinion, the zenith, right? Of just different people, no question marks around what they bring to the team and the meritocracy, but that they were able to bring their full selves into the team, and now operating from a position of trust because they really know each other and they care. They'll die for each other. And then this very clear goal of just wanting to win, but not just winning, like winning in our way, right? In our style. And right now we're actually redefining how rugby is won and being played, and like we're bamboozling teams. And this is pure South African. And I think I was telling this to my team, this golden thread, this story, it's just, there's so many nuggets in it, around, where you start, culture, where you're trying to go, and the human story within that we can all learn from. And it's right there in front of us.
So I think that's the perfect transition to get back to Yoco, right? And so your story, your vision, the kind of culture that you've built as you've gone on is like obviously the entity that you're in, that you are right now versus where you were a decade ago is two very different things. And I still know what it probably feels like, is it feels like you're only still getting started. But talk to me about just that, because one thing, we're speaking at quite a macro philosophical level around orientating ourselves towards a common path, so a significant camaraderie. And it's like, this is the nature of why I love entrepreneurial business as well. It's just there's inherently more meaning than I find in larger corporate businesses participating in Milton Friedman economics. And so practically speaking, with you and your business, how is it that you've gotten to orientate where you are? Actually, the question I want to ask, you and me are quite similar in the sense that I also like to think very philosophically macro and at that level. I'm nowhere near you in terms of life cycle stage of my own business and therefore impact. How is it that you translate that into practical tangibility that other people can follow? Because not everyone can embrace this level of thinking. They need to think something more tangible and practical. How do you translate this vision and culture into your business to get everyone aligned towards the direction that you want to take it in?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it felt easier pre-COVID. All in one space. The world hadn't gone crazy, and in all honesty, it's been really hard post-COVID. With hybrid work and just, I think also just people being knocked off their feet a little bit, right? Just in terms of life and all these changes and the like. So there's just so much to integrate within that and to take into consideration. But I think the number one thing for me is just always re-emphasizing, why are we here and why are we doing this? Why does it matter? It's such an easy thing to take for granted, even for myself. But you have the privilege of engaging, with our customers every day, right? Around the office, near home, at a restaurant. These are all customers. And there's an immediate connection to what we do that sits within that, and that's been really amazing for the team to have that engagement. And then we have a all hands every week, 4 p.m. on a Thursday. So we just stop everything we're doing and we gather. It's called the gathering.
The whole company.
The whole company, yeah. And we just spend an hour together. And beginning of that process is just a bit of storytelling around just core values, somebody just talking through an experience or how they see it, why it matters to them. It's been such a good ritual just to help re-emphasize our belief system. Another thing that we do is we try and invite a customer to this gathering on average about once a month. And I'll do a bit of a fireside with them just to have a bit of a conversation. And that's amazing, right? Like listening to one of our customers, having a conversation, hearing their story, what they're dealing with, and also just learning what we could do better as a company in the process. It's incredibly grounding, and also just the transparency of the customer can literally sit through the whole session, right? And you hear like some of the things we're grappling with and working through. But I think what that also does is that it removes this barrier between us and our customers. Like we're just part of one community. I know within a business like ours, it's a little bit unique in that sense, in that we're entrepreneurs working with entrepreneurs, right? So there is that immediate link. But what I do find is that as long as that wall, or like there is no wall, as long as that's constantly reinforced, all the information, the data, the inputs, the connection, the relevance, all these things just become completely heightened. So kind of in general, the more on the ground we are, the more connected we are to our customers and to each other, the more relevant everything feels and the more grounded everything feels. And this always forces trying to pull you away from this basic reality. There's always something to do on your computer or somewhere to be or meet, blah, 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 blah. But the truth lies in this very basic interaction. And that's something we're really trying to push as much as possible.
We use the word impact a lot, and when I say we, I mean that's just a collective we. I like to think of the word contribution because impact is big inherently. It's not what we're aiming for, but contribution is more continuous. And I love the way that you explain that, because when it comes down to communicating strategy, purpose, values, the way I like to think about this is that only when you're getting bored of the message are other people starting to hear it, right? Because you think about it almost all the time, but the people in your team, the stakeholders, customers, they're less than 1% of it are they giving their attention there. So this repetition of it is there. And I think the point there is like how this weekly ritual you have is a way for you, one, to not get bored. I'm saying the same thing over again, you getting tired of your own voice, is because, but it's also linked directly to contribution. So it's not just around the impact, but it's like, what are we contributing as a business? And it's also talking about at the level of behavior and values, what are these stories and what are the contributions making? Obviously, we'll highlight some of these cultural champions within the business as well. But the whole point of that really brings this tangibility to what on a weekly basis can we see contributions towards just what we care about and deriving meaning from work, which I think is something that we've got a huge deficit in the world in general at the moment, is meaning in work. And by creating that, there's this unlock of belonging that can happen, but also performance and motivation and engagement. And I think what I'm summarizing again with the reading between the lines is that the practicality you bring between stories around values instead of just repeating what the values are, customer stories around purpose and mission to highlight what this is actually looking like, really brings it to life. What I want to know is, what is the impact that ritual has on your people and your business?
Yeah, it's just an opportunity once a week in a ritualistic manner to reconnect with the why. That's really what it's about, and this is very, very important. And I think storytelling is an underestimated medium. It's the most ancient thing about us, if you think about it, right? Sitting around the fire and just telling a story. This is how knowledge was passed on before we could write things down, was these stories. So it's a very basic human thing, and we really, really believe in it. It's powerful, and it really honors the individual and what they have to say. In addition to that, something interesting that we did, we got approached in our early days by a guy named Gregor. So he runs something called the Definitive Process. He's literally been photojournaling the company for the past decade. And just, his role has evolved. He's joined us full time now, but basically he just sits and just observes and takes images. And if you go to yoco.com/journey, you can see all these stories from the early days and some of the narratives that sit within them. But it's now, over this time, become such a valuable asset for us in terms of having a visualization of kind of very prominent moments and milestones to quite innocuous ones, right? But you just get a feeling of the texture. So I guess maybe just back to kind of your practical point here. Just always take the time to tell stories and to capture them. It matters. It becomes the consciousness of your culture and how you can pass it on. And it's an asymmetric return on investment relative to the work done to do it and what you get out of it, and it also compounds over time.
Explain what you mean, right? Again, for someone who is not like me, an organizational psychologist that understands this, is like, well, what's the value of doing this, right? Because it's like, because for I imagine people, it's like, look, that sounds fantastic. I don't know if that's the right utilization of resources right now, and it also feels a little bit self-indulgent, right? To be able to tell these stories, like, why should we go capture this, put it for somewhere, and like, what is this going to do, right? And I'm being deliberately cynical because I think a lot of people don't think that way. I think a lot of people can intrinsically see the value, but like I think just that one little extra step to get people to do similar rituals like this. What's the value? Like, what are the things that you've noticed change in behavior because of doing these things?
Well, let's make it practical, right? So anyone listening, go to www.yoco.com/journey and go right to the beginning, the first story, and work your way towards the end. And you'll have a feeling for the business without knowing me or anyone personally in the business. You'll just be able to see it, feel it, and get a sense. And this has been such a powerful tool for us during the recruiting process. People are just, trying to get to know the business. And they can do that. It's helped us even in fundraising, engaging in stakeholders. It's like, this is who you are. This is who we are. Here's our story. It's available. It's transparent, and you can make sense of it. But it's basically almost see it as a visual encyclopedia of the company, and in a sense, like it's memory, right? And this is really, really powerful for a host of reasons, mainly quickly being able to connect people into the essence of the business, and in particular outsiders.
Cool. Thank you for that. That also motivated me, because what I've been wanting to do for a while is, the founder of a business that's been going, and I mean, we are almost 4 years old, and it's kind of this, and of being 4 years old, we have changed so much in this journey, just in terms of our own nature. I think our core philosophy stayed the same, but there's also just still this frustration of, because we've changed so much, it's also our duty to ensure that people understand what we are. And it's it's this frustration of, because I live and breathe it, it's like, I wish you could just get it the way that I do. And I've wanted to share this, but not know how and why. And I haven't had the motivation to do so, because it's like, I don't want to be this typical person on LinkedIn sharing this story of just for transactional reasons. But I think what you've inspired me to do now is to do that from a storytelling perspective. And what I'm going to do is, either through video or just voice noting ChatGPT for like half an hour, and getting it to write this out, and just getting the stories out fully transparent in terms of what our journey has been, and where we're headed now. I think one will be cathartic, but also, and just again, there is like, I don't attach any specific outcome to that, except for the fact that it's going to go how it's going to go, and whoever's going to consume that will get us, right? And then once they get us, they'll know how they can participate in the journey.
100%. Yeah, that's the right way to look at it. When we kicked this off, over 10 years ago, people thought I was crazy. Like, you paying somebody to do this? But when you have a long-term orientation, I just kind of pictured myself looking back and going, wow, like, we just have this story and this visualization and this encyclopedia of the business that's inherently going to be valuable, and it has been.
And now that triggered a thought, talk to me about those moments where you've had a thought like that, where it's like, I'm going to spend money on this, and everyone around you is like, this is extremely eccentric. I don't understand what the value of this is going on. And you're like, just raise. I think it's so much easier said than done to back yourself in those situations and decisions. How is it that you navigate those moments, like every entrepreneur does, of not listening to the doubters?
Yeah, I think it's a big part of the constitution, right? I operate from a strong place of belief. So once I believe in something, I really, really do. And I think there was sort of two moments I think of. So one, when we moved from our first office, which was on 4 Loop Street in the Cape Town city center, it's like 100 square meters. And when we outgrew that, I think we're like 16, 17 people. Like, somebody couldn't move their head without you noticing. And then we moved to an office next door, which is about 350 square meters. So it's quite we tripled the space. And I remember, walking in with my business partners, and it was just the sense that it's too big, right? And we're going to float in the space. And I remember looking at them, I'm like, guys, trust me, we're going to beat the space, And there was just such a sense of ease when I said that. Unfortunately, they got on board, and lo and behold, like, we got to the same situation in that space where somebody moved their neck, and he kind of picked that up. So that's a story I always like reflecting on, which is where this is the smallest we're ever going to be, right? And it's easy to forget that sometimes. And then Another story was, I remember like 2018, we just raised our Series A, and just kind of were really struggling for growth because we had hit that point where we were trying to cross the chasm, but we didn't have enough control over our product, and uh, the partner, we were having problems with the partner institution we were working with in terms of processing payments. It was just all sorts of things just going very wrong. It was a very difficult time. And uh, I remember just having this profound sense that okay, we need to codify a vision, we need to codify our values, so that the company can scale, right? And move, and people can take decisions, and people just know how things work here. And that wasn't an intuitive or an obvious thing with all kind of these very bottom line things happening at the same time. So taking the time and carving out the time to do that work was counterintuitive. But in the end, once we got that work done and we started propagating it into the business, it just released this energy and this belief and this flow, like down to like our marketing strategy, which is basically stayed the same, which is we just tell the stories of our customers that emerged out of that. And through to, deciding to build our own payment switch, our own terminal software, all these things like that really kind of unlocked the business. It all emerged out of that work. And it just kind of was one decision that made the next 1,000 decisions easier. So that was I reflect on those two times quite often.
I want to get into that in more depth because the nature of the customers that we have are often in that similar life cycle stage, but a little bit further on. And the point of realization is almost now reactive because I'm burning out as a leader. I'm making decisions all the time, and things aren't as structured. And there's just this massive decision fatigue. And to your point around making the one decision that's going to lead to the next 1,000, right? For other people and for most entrepreneurs, it's very difficult to go through this journey and not realize it. And selfishly, it's very hard. It's hard for me to be able to communicate this without sounding like I'm selling to you, right? And so, what is that? What is that context that you were in? How would you describe the nature of the business at that point and the challenges where it's like, I actually think really sitting down, formalizing our strategy is the right thing to do now? What state was the business in at that time?
It's just kind of everything that you were doing before and everything that got you there just stops working, right? And kind of the hustling, the iterating, the figuring things out on the go, which propelled us in the early days. That just started to break, right? Lack of infrastructure, control, the kind of scalable process, all these things were just not in place. And then alongside that, as founders, we weren't always in the room anymore. So you just started feeling everything slowing down, grinding to a halt, growth started to taper, like all these things just started coming into play. And that created the burning platform to work on this higher order stuff. And the timing was correct because you have a vision, you have a feeling, you have an intention around what you try and do, and then you go out and you do it, and it may work and it may not work. And it actually felt like that was the right time to crystallize those things because it was, we now had history, data, stories, context around, well, what worked and what did not work, right? And what was the emergent formula when things were working, and can we codify that? But that came from doing. So I think trying to do this stuff a bit early, yes, you want to have a sense, but then there's the reality and then dealing with the reality, overcoming it, and then codifying that lesson into something that you can take forward.
Yeah, very, very well explained compared to how I see it as well. I wanted to still unpack, why was it the right timing for you? Because a lot of people at that time will go back to what it is that they know, and growth starting to taper off, things are slowing down. So it's like innovation and sales, right? It's like what can we do to improve product, improve customer experience, improve sales, drive that marketing? It's really going to go back to those problems. That's what I see a lot of people do, but it doesn't solve this intrinsic lack of clarity and confidence around the direction that's going there. Why for you was that the right timing? How did you have that realization?
I don't know, Cameron, to be honest. It felt intuitive. I think I just was attuned to it, that it just felt like these things were getting in our way. This was all reality. We weren't always in the room anymore. And working backwards, that became the answer. I don't know, kind of, it just felt intuitive at the time. I wish I could label it a bit more, but honestly, I just kind of look around and go, okay, actually, we need to do some work on this.
Okay, cool. Where you were then as an individual, also as a leader, as the CEO of the company, versus what you are now. I want to obviously separate this in terms of the nature of the three roles, actually, the nature of your organization, your role, and then you as a person and leader. How has your experience of your company changed compared to that moment versus now?
Two major changes is obviously the company's bigger. We have more people. So that's a factor. And then also just the world's changed quite significantly over the last 5 years. I mean, we really underestimate. It's the 5th of March, right? So 5 years ago, was it 5 years or 4 years ago? It's 5 years ago, right?
5 years ago. It's 2025, yeah.
Exactly.
Lockdown.
Exactly. So that's just, brought in a whole new dimension. I feel very strongly that white collar work has hit a bit of a wobble. If you think about other industries or other spaces, there was just a very strong, let's just get back to normal, right? Let's get back to the restaurant. Let's get back to serving patients. It's just a very kind of almost forced back to normal. White collar work hasn't had that privilege, and I say privilege because these systems, how we work, how we collaborate, they were built over a long horizon, and then basically, in the last 5 years, we've just wiped the floor with them, and some of these things that we've replaced them with, I think have just created more problems than solutions, right? So,
Such as?
So kind of the removal of natural boundaries between work and home, that's really important, right? Just having an opportunity to disconnect, reset, being fully present with your family. This distributed remote work thing, it's just stretched out the day. There's no boundaries anymore. When I was growing up, sure, my dad would be in a study from time to time, but when he was home, right? And same with my mom. Now, you're in the study all the time, but you can't walk through that door as a child, right? It's just so this kind of, how this boundary has now come into the household, and families need to engage with that, and days are stretching out because you're doing calls earlier and you're doing actual work at night. So I think I always try and speak higher order. I just think white collar work is in a weird place. I really, really do. And it needs to get back to some sort of norm where people just have these clear boundaries that were set up for a reason and that evolved over a long period of time. We can't just remove them as a society and go, okay, well, let's see what happens. That's a little bit what's happened over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I hear you. It means that the domain switching is very hard. I mean, this is a work from home office, and I find it in the micro moments when I have to deal with the nature of realities of at home, because I am at home, and just because I haven't budgeted attention for it, my irritability is high, and it's not how I like to show up in the world, because I'm so switched on with work. But then I have to deal with this home stuff, and I'm just I just become a dick, and I don't want to be a dick. But if I would just had to be able to create the separation, I can be the present, calm, attentive person. But because I have to deal with these two things, it creates an unnecessary stress. That if the context were separated, it was there. However, I say this like it's a problem. It wasn't my choice to have an at-home office, right? I definitely am going to be moving over towards co-working spaces quite soon for that exact reason. Okay, we've spoken about the organization, right? Your role. How's your role changed from then to now?
Yeah, so obviously it's a lot more hands-on involved back then. I still am now. We're transitioning from a single product to a multi-product company and reconfiguring a bunch of things and becoming an ecosystem. So it's kind of back to startup days in that sense. But what is for sure is within this evolution of the org, there has to be a shift in my role, right? From being very hands-on to being a coach, being supportive, and truly allowing the team to get on with the work. And part of that process is, how do you codify the entrepreneurial mindset, the attention to detail, the care, kind of also just a lot of the collective wisdom that's evolved over the years. How do you codify that into something that the team is able to put to work? And that never stops, right? It's an ongoing project and very much something that we're working through.
How are you doing that?
Yeah, so I mentioned our core values. That's very important. We call it the Yoco formula. Something we recently worked on, calling it a talent profile. So it's just a very simple articulation of what we expect from people inside the business. So the first topic is just being relentlessly effective. So just no excuses, get it done right, get it over the line. This is so important in an environment like ours, when you're dealing with so many variables and all sorts of things. You just have to have the will to get things over the line. Another thing is just being a multiplier. So actively helping teammates. Another one is being real with a dash of quirk, and really there is just this invitation to be 100% yourself within the organization. So yeah, just a couple of examples of some of the things that we're really just trying to codify what it means to be in this business and what can help you thrive. And we're just constantly trying to build out these things to help the team. Also just we've got an innovation process that's really important, right? So we've got strategic goals, these ideas that we have in mind to solve them. We need to test those ideas and make sure that they sound. And then because we're a fintech, often there's a piece of capability that's required to deliver on that idea. So whether it's a license or a piece of infrastructure or just something of the like, that has to be done before even sort of deep product development happens on top of that. And then it's then starting to get it into the market, getting to product market fit, scaling it. and then eventually retiring it, right? And we have everything running on this process that touches all parts of the business, and this really emerged, funny enough, from the Toyota production system. So it's quite a famous system and really the foundations of Agile. And just something I realized is that in the manufacturing space, just because of the nature that you're dealing with hardware, you need a lot of discipline, right? To make sure that you're building things that customers want, that's of a certain quality, and that can be done at scale. So I think I have a lot of respect for manufacturing in that sense. This kind of the margin of error is so low just because of the inherent cost. And often what can happen in the software world is because you can just build and throw things away and all this type of stuff, there often is a lack of discipline, and can lead to a lot of waste. So we're implementing that, socializing that, starting to use the same language, just so that everyone understands where something is, what's next, what's expected, and how we're going to get it out there. And this is quite central to our multi-product journey.
So now the last question that I have out of these three is, how have you changed as an individual in this time?
Yeah, I think I've had to just grow and mature. Of course, doing a startup, getting into scale up, I call it extreme sports, because you are facing the elements constantly, a lot of unpredictable things, both externally and internally, and you often don't have the right clothes on, right? So it's extreme sports, and kind of taking that analogy forward. It's just learning to put those clothes on quickly, starting to anticipate when you need to put those clothes on, and then maturing in that process. So yeah, I've just really grown as a person through these tests. Definitely just a lot more compassionate, open, reflective, and it's just also made me extremely humble. I think you really come to terms with your strengths and your limitations, and you have to be very honest with yourself about that. So yeah, just feel more grounded as a person over this journey, and it's a journey I'm very proud of.
I'm very proud of you walking that journey, because you just spoke a lot of values that I hold very true, and it's great to show someone that's been through the journey and can role model that. So thank you for going through the extreme sports and continuing to do it.
Yes.
The final question, Katelgo, because now we are out of time, and I would love to continue this conversation into perpetuity, but we need to get back to life.
Yeah.
What's the one question that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you that you'd like to answer now?
Yeah, sure. Maybe just like, where are we going as a company? I think it's important. It's rare in your life where you set out to do something. In our case, was open commerce, democratizing access. So you set out to do something, of that magnitude, and you take a big step towards making that happen. So when you look around the market today, business owner wants to get a card machine, they can. We estimate there's probably about 1 million merchants now in the market, so it's really grown quite significantly since we started, and it's vibrant, right? And it's competitive, and there's access, and so there's a real market. And I think this is really important, and we want to see more and more of this in South Africa across a bunch of industry segments. It just net benefits the end consumer, and it fosters innovation and movement. So what's next for us? We describe our previous age as the access age, and fostering access. Our next age is about product. So how do we become a really excellent product oriented company where we see a problem, we understand it deeply through the eyes of our customers, and we're able to build a solution from scratch to solve that problem and deliver that through a product, right? So not just taking something and cobbling it together and putting some wrapper around it, but actually building something that works well, that's intuitive, that's intelligent, that's integrated. I think our insight is the moment a business owner is using a tool that's not integrated and sitting outside of kind of the day-to-day activities, you create data disparity, and as such, the need to reconcile and to pull things together. And that's non-value adding time with a segment that just doesn't have a lot of time. So a lot of our customers are spending evenings and weekends doing admin, trying to reconcile, trying to make sense of things. Our product vision is all Yoco, right? So how do you have an ecosystem that brings everything into one place, that's tightly integrated with a combination of things that we build in-house and third-party solutions that can plug in? But in the end, for the business owner, it's all sitting in one place. They're not having to reconcile. We're bringing admin to a minimum, and they can focus their time on improving their product or service or building new products and services, retaining customers, getting new customers. These are value-adding activities, and we want to give our customers time to focus on those things. It just has a net impact.
So my summary would be that the direction you're going in is giving more entrepreneurs the freedom to focus on value-adding activities by reducing financial admin as much as possible.
Exactly.
Katlego, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Thank you for being such an inspirational leader. Thank you for being a visionary. Thank you for being authentically you. And I can't wait to see the new heights that Yoco will get to.
Thank you, Cameron. I really enjoyed it. Take care.
What an inspiration Katlego is to me. I don't know if he is to you, but I'm assuming he is to you, because just the story, the way that he shares his journey and his perspective on the world is absolutely fascinating. And obviously one thing that stood out to me is the timing of when you started thinking about strategy as a business. I mean, I think that's obvious to any of us. When you're a 300-person company, strategy becomes an obvious thing to start formalizing. But before that, when is it that we start doing that in the journey? And when he clarified that it's when the clarity was low, when what got you here is not really solving any problems and taking you further forward. The problems that you're facing now are fundamentally different. When you are struggling with decisions and having to deal with so many different things at once, right? This timing when, things are starting to get a bit hectic in the business, potentially even chaotic, right? What was counterintuitive to what he felt at the time, or intuitive to him, but what the timing was surprising was to actually take a step back, focus on strategy, formalizing that and the direction, and empowering through. And that's really what worked for him. And this is what it is that we do. And this is ideally when we want to work with people very proactively in the journey, is when they're at that point of the talk around Series A or post product market fit, or just at that point when, what used to work is no longer working. That's when we want to really be helping with strategy, because that's when the nature and the life cycle stage of a business that you're in fundamentally changes, and the approach towards strategy becomes so useful. And it's really this distribution of thinking from what's in your head into your management team and into your leadership team, so that everyone can be super clear on what they're executing on, and also free you up to focus on growth and innovation while they focus on execution, becomes such an important way to really make those few decisions that solve for 1,000 decisions, and to really give the clarity and confidence through this new transition that a business goes through. And this is what we do at Metabol. So if you want to chat to me about how it is that we approach this life cycle stage, how it is that we approach formulating strategy in this direction, drop me a line, right? I think you know where to find me by this point, but if you don't, click the link in the description of this podcast below. Let's set up a chat and let's talk about how it is that you can develop greater clarity and confidence in your direction of your business moving forward and get you through to the next life cycle stage. That's it for me for now. Thank you very much for listening to another episode of The Founder Files. I'll see you next time. Cheers.